Welcome! Today I'm going to be sharing a fun project for creating a customized case for your favorite pair of scissors. So this one here carries my favorite pair of scissors in my travel bag, nice and comfortably. If you have a little travel bag that you bring your art supplies around in, you're going to want one of these. Okay, so for this project what I did was I repurposed some fused plastic bags. So you could create your own fused plastic bags with plastic bags. There's tons and tons of tutorials on the internet showing you how to fuse some plastic bags together. It's really, really simple. So I'm using this piece here and basically tracing around my scissors with about an inch around. And then I'm just going to simply cut that piece out. Now I'm using this fused plastic, but you could basically use this technique with any material you like. You can use felt, you can use denim, you can use canvas, you could use leather, any fabric that you have that you would like to repurpose. And now that you have one piece, just double check that it does in fact fit your scissor nicely. I'm going to even out the top here a little bit more. Trim it off. Double check once again. Okay, so now I'm going to use that same exact piece to trace it out and cut it out. Double checking once again. So I'm going to make a little mark here at the widest point where the handles are going to enter the sewing case, the scissor case, and threading a needle with some embroidery floss. You could also use wax thread, whichever type of thread you like to work with. Threading up the needle, and I'm going to double it so that it's nice and strong. And generally I pulled about, I would say about 2 arms lengths for this project. I always find that using a book awl and pre-punching holes in thicker materials when sewing makes life a lot easier. It could also help ensure that you have all of your stitches measured out and spaced the way you'd like them to. We'll just fast forward this part here. And using that top piece to poke holes through the back side as well. Now you can go ahead and take your thread. I'm going to be doing a basic blanket stitch on this here. So since I doubled my thread, I'm just going to open up those 2 pieces of strings by the knot and run that needle through as my anchor point. Trimming off that little tail. And now beginning to stitch. So basically what you're going to be doing is feeding your needle through the hole and wrapping the thread once around that needle on the back side, just for a basic blanket stitch. Bringing the needle through, bringing the thread around, and pulling through. And you want to pull with a nice amount of tension. This way you're keeping everything nice and snug together. And feeding through. And once you get to your last hole, what you'll do is go in a couple of times, making sure that that closing point is nice and strong, and giving it a knot through all the threads there. Once your project is complete too, it's always a good idea to come through and put a dab of glue on top of all of your knots. So I want to create a little closure. So I cut off an extra piece of fabric material from my scrap, and I'm just going to do a little running stitch around the outside. This is purely decorative. Coming back, I'll just pre-punch these guys, make life easier. So next I just need to attach it to the back side. I'm just going to fold it over, figure out where I want that buttonhole to be, and once I have that space, going to pre-poke those holes, holding it down with my thumb, making sure I don't poke my fingers. I'm also going to poke 4 holes to do an X stitch. I'm going to get one in each corner all the way through to the backing fabric, holding it in place, making sure it doesn't slip. And I'm going diagonal, opposite corner to opposite corner. Then I'm going to come up through the back into the next hole. See, that got a little wobbly there. Next hole, and then opposite that one. So I got a little X going on here. Little X. And then I'm going to come back up. And now I'm basically doing like an outline around that X. Basically, this is the part that's going to get the most amount of pressure, opening and closing. So we just want to make sure that this little handle stays on nice and snug. And then once you're happy with the tension of your threads, just run your needle through some of that stitching and make your knot. So I have a little bit of extra embroidery floss on my needle here. So I love this color. I'm going to turn into a little tassel on the very bottom where the blade would go. And I'm just feeding it through, leaving that little tail and coming through those stitches again, pulling down. And next, all I'm going to do is just tie this little spot here, with a little bit of the teal. And you could basically add as many threads as you like to your tassel. And of course, this part is completely optional. I'm going to tie that twice, and then I'm going to come around and tie it onto the other side, just to make sure it's nice and snug. Then just give that knot a little trim. And this is the part where you give your tassel a little haircut. You could trim it as long or as short as you like it to be. Ta-da! She's cute. Next is your button. So you want to figure out where exactly you want to put your button, best placement for it, and what direction you want the button holes to be. So I'm pre-marking while the button's on top, poking through. and then gonna stitch that button on. So my thread is doubled and I did not knot the end because when I run it through, I'm going to leave a little tail, just like so. Leave it just like that, and I'm going to run through that buttonhole one more time. Just like so. Making sure that doesn't get tangled up, which of course it did. Move that out of the way, and then make sure it's snug before knotting. So I'm going to give it a nice triple knot here. And as I mentioned before, what you'll probably want to do is give all of your knots, especially if you're using embroidery floss, a little dab of glue. Make sure it stays in place nicely. Trim that off, and I'm leaving a little tail this time because it looks nice. Purely decorative purposes. And now this is where I'm going to want to put my buttonhole. I could feel underneath where the button is. Now the thing with buttonholes is that over time they do stretch out. So I'm going to go a little short, knowing this. And I'm just pushing through with the X-Acto here. Gently going through without severing a finger. Give a little wiggle and test. Make it a little bit bigger. But not too big. Okay, so that will do. Slightly snug, but it will soften up and loosen up the more I use them. Let's make sure that everything fits and works nicely one more time. All right. I think we are in business. Awesome. Okay. So, you know I can't leave well enough alone. We're going to keep going with this one. Now comes the paint. I'm going to start off with my Prismacolor here. It's a permanent marker, or a permanent pen rather, and this is a nice fine point, and I'm just going to do a little doodle of the design that I'm going to paint onto the surface. Now I'm using craft acrylic paints for this project here, and using these little markings here as my guide as I go. So for the rest of this process of me painting, I am just gonna speed up the timing here this way. You could see this in a fast forward time lapse. In case you're wondering why I have Lincoln logs on my work table, I like to use those as brush rests. And I also have a chopstick rest also up there, as you can see. Alright, so let the time lapse begin. here is a variation of the previous project, but we're working with scraps of leather instead of our fused plastic material with an alternative closure, which you'll see at the end. In addition, we'll also be working with gel pens and markers instead of acrylic craft paints. So take a look and enjoy.